Welcome back to the deep dive. We have a massive stack of documents today, and honestly, the temperature on this one is incredibly high.
It really is.
We are looking at a collision, a real head-on collision between international law, the gritty reality of, domestic politics, and the emotional core of national identity.
It's a perfect storm.
Mm.
It really is. Usually we talk about one of those things in isolation, maybe a legal brief or a political scandal,
Right, one or the other.
But today, they're all happening at once, and they're feeding off each other in a way that is, well, it's pretty explosive.
And it all centers around a new word, a label. You know how powerful labels can be in politics?
Oh, absolutely.
They stick. They frame the entire narrative. They can simplify these huge, complex feelings into a single soundbite. And this one, well, it is designed to bite. The word is senators.
Senators,
Why?
it's a portmanteau, obviously. You got Sina, which is the Tagalog word for China, and you combine it with senators.
It sounds almost like a comic book villain, doesn't it? Like the Terminators, but with this whole geopolitical twist. But, despite how catchy it is, the implication is incredibly serious.
It's deadly serious. This is not just a playground insult or some random Twitter hashtag that trends for a day. It is a direct accusation of betrayal.
Betrayal, that's a strong word.
It is. It implies that within the Philippine Senate, we're talking the upper house of the legislative branch, the people writing the actual laws, that there is a block of elected officials who are effectively prioritizing the interests of a foreign power.
Specifically Beijing.
Specifically Beijing over the interests of the Philippines.
That is such a heavy charge. We're not just talking about a difference in policy opinion here, like how to handle the economy or something.
No, not at all.
This is something that feels treason adjacent.
Exactly. And this term, it didn't just appear in a vacuum. It started circulating, and it really gained what our source, the editorial, calls its fangs because of a very specific incident.
Yeah.
A specific statement that made a lot of people just stop and ask, wait, did he really just say that?
And we are talking about the focal point of this entire controversy, Senator Rodante Marcoleta.
We are. And to really understand why this blew up, we have to look at the very specific phrasing he used. It's all in the details.
Okay, so let's set the scene a little before we dive into the analysis. We're talking about the West Philippine Sea, specifically the Calayan Island Group, or the CAIG.
Right. The Spratlys to the rest of the world.
This is, of course, disputed territory. Tensions are incredibly high. We see reports of ships getting water cannoned, lasers being used.
Diplomatic protests being filed almost weekly at this point.
It's this constant simmering tension, and right in the middle of this incredibly tense atmosphere, Senator Marcoleta drops what can only be described as a bombshell.
He was discussing the legal status of the Calayan Island Group, and he made a claim that, well, it just stunned legal experts. He said, and I'm sort of paraphrasing the logic here, that the Kiaji lies outside our EEZ.
Our exclusive economic zone.
Exactly, the 200-mile zone.
Okay, so he's starting with a geographical claim. It's too far away. That's the basic argument.
Right, but then he immediately followed it up with a prescription, a recommendation. Because of that distance, his suggestion was, ang gawin po natin para matali ay give up natin ang kiig.
And the translation there is...
Let's just give up the kiig to make it easy.
To make it easy.
To make it easy.
Wow. Can we just pause on that for a second? To make it easy in geopolitics and foreign policy, is easy ever the goal?
Rarely. And certainly not when it comes to something as fundamental as territorial integrity. Easy, in this context, usually just means capitulation. It means surrender.
Now, to be fair to the senator, we do have to note that he has since denied this interpretation. He's walked it back or claimed he was misunderstood or that his words were taken out of context.
Which is the standard political playbook, right?
Of course. But the editorial we're analyzing today argues that in the world of public opinion, the bell has been rung. You can't unring it. The words are out there.
Once the phrase "give it up" leaves the mouth of a sitting senator, the damage is done. It enters the public consciousness. It becomes a data point.
It becomes a position, whether he wants it to be or not.
Precisely. It creates a crack in the national position, a weakness that can be exploited.
So here's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to try to move past the name calling. Cyanators is a very catchy tag, and we'll talk about why it's sticking, but we need to understand the machinery underneath it. We need to dismantle this argument piece by piece.
Right.
First, the law, the core claim. Is he right? If an island is far away outside that 200-mile line, do we lose our claim to it?
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
No. Definitely not. But we need to explain why not, because it involves a really common confusion between two very important legal concepts.
Okay. Then we need to look at the psychology, the politics of it. Why would a politician say this? Was it just a blunder? Was it ignorance of the law? Or is it, as some of these analysts are suggesting, a calculated bet on who the next president of the Philippines will be?
That's the political opportunism theory.
Yeah.
It's fascinating and, frankly, a little terrifying if you care about policy continuity.
And finally, we have to talk about the fallout, the aftermath, the lawsuits, the accusations of treason, and what this all actually means for the people living on those islands. Because, and this is so important, there are people there.
It is not just lines on a map or rocks in the ocean. It's a community.
Okay, so let's dive into the legal argument first, because on the surface, to a layman, Marcoletta's point, it sounds kind of logical.
Okay, explain that. How does it sound logical to you? Lay it out.
Well, I'm just picturing myself as a regular person looking at a map, right? If you tell me, hey, the rules say our economic zone extends 200 miles from our coast, and then I pull out a ruler and I measure, and this island is clearly at mile 300, the simple logical conclusion is, well, it's outside the zone, so it's not ours. We can't claim it.
Right. If you're measuring a fence line in your backyard, that logic holds up perfectly. If the deed to your house says your property ends at the big oak tree, you can't just claim the land past the oak tree.
Exactly. My fence stops there.
But international law, and specifically the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, it just doesn't work like real estate zoning. It's way more complex. And the editorial makes this crucial distinction that we really have to nail down.
Yeah.
It's the difference between sovereign rights and sovereignty.
Okay, let's unpack this slowly, because they sound like the same word. Sovereign is in both of them. It's confusing.
They do, but legally, they are apples and oranges. Completely different things. So let's start with the EEZ, the Exclusive Economic Zone. This is the 200-mile line. This gives a country sovereign rights.
Sovereign rights, which means what exactly?
It means you have the exclusive right to the resources within that zone. The fish in the water, the oil and natural gas under the seabed, the potential for wind energy above the water. It's an economic right.
Ah, so it's about the stuff, the valuable stuff.
It's about the stuff. You don't own the water itself. Ships from other countries, what's called freedom of navigation, they can pass through. You don't own this space in a territorial sense like you own your house.
Yeah.
You just own the right to exploit the economic value of it up to 200 nautical miles from your coast.
Got it. So it's like a permission slip for resources. It's an economic bubble around your country.
Exactly. A perfect way to put it. It's functional.
Okay.
It's about what you can do there, not what you own. Now, sovereignty is different. Sovereignty is ownership. Full stop. It applies to territory, to land, to soil, the actual islands themselves. And here is the absolute kicker. Sovereignty is not limited by distance.
It's not at all.
No. A country can have sovereignty over a piece of land that is thousands of miles away from its capital city. Think about the UK and the Falkland Islands, or France and its territories in the Pacific.
Right. And the editorial uses a fantastic analogy for this. I think this really clears it up for anyone who is still confused. It uses the example of Hawaii.
Yes, the Hawaii test. This is the perfect way to visualize the flaw in the argument.
So imagine if a U.S. congressman stood up on the floor of the House, they pull up a big map, and they say, hey, everyone, look at this. Hawaii is, 2,000 miles away from California? It is clearly outside the 200-mile EEZ of the mainland United States. Therefore, based on this distance, we should just give it up.
They would be laughed out of the room. I mean, they'd probably be investigated for sheer incompetence. It would be a career-ending moment.
Because Hawaii is sovereign U.S. territory.
Exactly. The distance is completely irrelevant. The United States has sovereignty over the land of Hawaii. It is a state. And because it owns the land of Hawaii, Hawaii then generates its own maritime zones.
Oh, interesting. So the island itself gets a bubble.
The island gets its own bubble. It has its own territorial sea, its own contiguous zone, and its own EEZ extending out from its shores. The land generates the rights to the sea, not the other way around.
So applying this logic back to the Philippines and the Kalayaan Island group.
The Kalayaan Island group is claimed by the Philippines as sovereign territory. Not because it happens to fall inside the EEZ of Palawan, but because the Philippines claims sovereignty over the land itself based on history, on occupation, on law.
So the argument is that we own the soil.
We own the soil. And because we own the soil, it doesn't matter if it's 200 miles, 300 miles, or 500 miles away. If it's our territory, it is our territory, period.
So to say it's outside the EEZ, so we should give it up, it's a fundamental category error.
It's using a ruler that was designed for measuring fishing rights to try and measure the ownership of land. It is legally incoherent. It completely confuses the resource zone with the territory itself.
But, and this is a key question for me, Senator Marcoleta is a lawyer, isn't he?
He is.
So how does a legislator who is also a lawyer make that kind of basic mistake?
And that
Yeah.
That is the billion-dollar question. That's where all the speculation begins. Is it a genuine mistake, a simple misunderstanding, or is it a deliberate obfuscation, a purposeful muddying of the waters?
We'll get to the motive in a bit, but before we do, I think we really need to solidify the reality of what the KED actually is. Because I think for a lot of listeners, and maybe even for these politicians, the West Philippine Sea can feel very abstract.
Oh, absolutely. It's just blue on a map, maybe some little dots.
Right. It's just a rock. Why are we fighting over it? You hear that argument sometimes. Why risk a war for a few uninhabitable rocks?
But the source material we're looking at today really emphasizes that the Kalayaan Island Group is not just a collection of rocks. It is a municipality.
A municipality. As in a town, a legal town.
Legally, yes. It is a legally constituted municipality of the province of Palawan. It has a mayor. It has a local government unit. It has an annual budget allocated by the national government. It's on the books.
And it has citizens, Filipino citizens.
It does. And let's look specifically at Pag-asa Island. This is the biggest island in the group that the Philippines occupies. It is the seat of that municipality. The source lists the infrastructure there to really drive this point home, to make it feel real.
Okay, what's there?
They have a school.
A school.
Wow.
Okay, a school means children, means families. It means there are teachers there grading papers at night.
Correct. It means a community is planning for its future. They have a health clinic. They have an active fishing community that lives and works there. It's their livelihood.
Yeah.
And this one is so key from a legal and administrative standpoint. They have a commission on elections office.
You can register to vote on Pag-asa Island.
You can. And people do. It is a fully functioning, if remote, arm of the Philippine state. Our source says there are approximately 400 Filipino residents living there right now.
400 people. That's not insignificant. That's a small village. That's a community with its own life, its own routines.
It is. So when a senator from Manila stands up and says, let's give it up to make it easy, he isn't just trading a coordinate on a GPS map. He is talking about abandoning a community.
He's talking about 400 Filipinos.
400 Filipinos who wake up every day, send their kids to that school, fish in those waters for their food and income. He is suggesting stripping them of their home, their citizenship, and their protection under the flag.
It really, really changes the moral weight of the argument, doesn't it? When you frame it that way. It's not about rocks at all. It's about people.
It completely does.
Yeah.
It raises the stakes from a dry legal dispute to a profound humanitarian and national integrity issue. And that brings us right back to that term, senators.
Right.
The editorial argues that by ignoring these facts, the law of sovereignty, the history, the actual people living on the islands, these politicians aren't just being legally inaccurate, they are appearing to side with the oppressor, to use the editorial's very strong language.
Oppressor is a strong word. But in the context of the constant harassment of fishermen and the blocking of supply ships, that is certainly how many Filipinos feel.
The editorial doesn't pull its punches on this. And this leads us to the big why question. If the legal argument is so demonstrably weak, I mean, the Hawaii analogy just destroys it.
It does.
And the moral argument is so bad, abandoning 400 of your own citizens, why do it? Why would a politician whose entire job relies on getting votes say something that seems so universally unpopular?
It really seems like political suicide on its face. You'd think politicians would want to be seen as the hero of the story, the defender of the realm.
You would think so. It's usually the easiest political win there is.
So let's look at the data on this. Is being pro-China actually popular in the Philippines right now?
Not at all. It's the opposite. The editorial cites a recent OCTA research survey from last December, and the numbers are just stark. 60% Filipinos are explicitly distrustful of China.
60%. That's a landslide in any democracy. If you have 60% of the population disagreeing with you on a core national security issue, you are usually in very deep trouble.
And it goes even further than that. When they were asked who they see as the biggest threat to the country, the majority point directly to China. So if you're a populist politician, the logical move, the easy move, to use Marcoleta's word, is to wrap yourself in the flag and talk tough on Beijing.
Right. You bash the bully, that gets votes. I will defend our shores from all aggressors. That's the classic campaign speech.
It's politics 101. So why pivot? Why go against that massive tide of public opinion and risk being branded as a xenator? This is where we get into the theory of political opportunism.
Okay, tell me about this. Because opportunism usually implies, jumping on a popular bandwagon. This looks like jumping off the bandwagon and into a ditch.
The editorial references Herbie Gomez, who is an opinion writer for Rappler, and he argues that this isn't a mistake, it isn't a blunder, it is a cold, hard calculation. It's a hedge
A hedge against what?
against the future. The argument is that these politicians aren't really playing to the current administration of President Marcos Jr. They're looking past him. They're looking at the next administration.
They're playing the long game.
A very long game. Think about the whiplash in Philippine foreign policy over the last decade. It has been a roller coaster.
That's an understatement.
Under President Duterte, we saw this massive, historic pivot toward China, away from the United States, away from traditional allies. I need China, he famously said. He publicly set aside the arbitral ruling win.
Right, it was a complete and total realignment. For 6 years, the official tone from the top was very, very different. It was all about partnership with Beijing.
Then Marcos Jr. wins the election, and I think a lot of people expected him to continue that policy, right? He was the political ally of the Duterte.
That was the assumption, yeah.
But he doesn't. The pendulum swings back hard and fast. He immediately moves to strengthen the U.S. alliance. He grants more U.S. base access under the EDCA agreement, and he takes a very firm, very public stance on defending the West Philippine Sea.
So we have had this dramatic flip-flop. We went east, and then we swung right back to the west.
And the theory, according to the source, is this. What if it flips again?
Okay. So they're anticipating another 180-degree turn in foreign policy in the next election.
The editorial explicitly points to the possibility of the current vice president, Sara Duterte, who is the daughter of the former president, running for and winning the presidency in the future.
And the working assumption is that she would revert to her father's pro-China foreign policy.
That is the gamble these senators are reportedly making. They are positioning themselves early. They want to be seen as the ones who were friendly to the potential new power dynamic before it even arrives.
They're sending up a flare.
They're signaling to a potential future administration, and maybe even to Beijing itself, hey, remember me? I was the one who didn't bash you when everyone else was. I was the one who was looking for an easy way out.
That's incredibly cynical, to base your foreign policy stance not on the current situation, but on a hypothetical future election result.
It's the ultimate form of political survival instinct. It suggests that their loyalty isn't necessarily to the current public sentiment, or even arguably to the permanent national interest, but to their own future relevance in a hypothetical administration.
It's like buying stock in a company that you think is going to take over in a few years, even if everyone else hates that company right now.
Political opportunism is the polite term for it. I'm sure others would call it hedging your bets with a national territory as the poker chips.
But it's not just about this domestic political betting, is it? The editorial also talks about China itself as an active player in this game. They aren't just a passive observer waiting for Filipino politicians to like them.
Yes, that's a critical point. We cannot view this in a vacuum. China isn't just watching from the sidelines. They are actively shaping the political and economic landscape. The editorial describes two main prongs of this influence. First, what it calls soft diplomacy.
And how does that look on the ground? Is it, cultural exchanges and sending over pandas?
Sometimes. But more often and more effectively, it looks like concrete and steel. It involves pouring money into select provinces for infrastructure projects.
The wallet strategy, infrastructure diplomacy.
Exactly. Imagine you're a local governor or a mayor in a province. You desperately need a new bridge or a farm-to-market road, and the national government in Manila is slow with the funds, bogged down in bureaucracy.
A familiar story.
But then a Chinese consortium comes in and says, we can build that for you, fast, and with favorable loan terms.
You take the bridge, you have constituents who need to get their goods to market, you have to deliver for your people.
You take the bridge. And that creates a debt, not just financially, but a debt of gratitude. It creates a local-level economic dependency. So while the Senate in Manila is having these lofty debates about sovereignty and simonators, the reality on the ground in the provinces is being literally paved with Chinese investment.
It creates this huge disconnect. The national policy might be resist, but the local reality is collaborate to survive.
Precisely. And the second prong, which works in tandem with the first, is information, or more accurately, disinformation. The source mentions the use of provocative language and online influence operations designed to confuse the public.
Just muddying the waters, making people doubt the facts, doubt their own government's position.
And the senators, according to this analysis, are the politicians who have decided to ride this wave of Chinese influence rather than try to fight against it. But the editorial notes a really interesting difference between the, let's call it the old guard of pro-China politicians and this new crop that's getting the senator label.
What's the difference?
Subtlety, or rather, the complete lack thereof. Previous politicians who favored a closer relationship with China were apparently more nuanced. They knew how to play the game, they talked in code, they would use phrases like joint exploration or economic partnership. They focused on trade.
They didn't come right out and say, give up the island.
Right, and that is the clumsiness that the editorial really critiques Senator Marcoleta for.
Yeah.
He said the quiet part out loud. He made what lawyers call an admission against interest.
Let's talk about that phrase, admission against interest. You mentioned earlier that this is really dangerous from a legal standpoint for the Philippines.
It is terrifying for the country's international lawyers. Jay Batamakal, who's the director of the Institute for Maritime Affairs and Law of the Sea, I mean, this is a man who has spent his entire professional life defending these waters. He called these remarks alarming for this exact reason.
So how does that work in, say, an international courtroom or a tribunal? How is it used against you?
Okay, imagine the Philippines decides to go back to an international tribunal to defend its claim over the Kiai or to protest Chinese actions. We're in the courtroom. We are presenting our maps, our historical documents, our treaties, and then China's lawyers stand up and say, Your Honors, the Philippines claims they have sovereignty over this island. But look, here's a video clip of one of their own sitting senators, a high-ranking government official, on record saying it is outside their jurisdiction and that they should just give it up to make things easy.
Oof, that's a killer argument. It just deflates your whole case.
It acts as powerful evidence that even the claimant doesn't fully believe in their own claim. It cuts the legs out from under the diplomats and the lawyers trying to argue the case on the world stage. It weakens the national position significantly.
It's like your own defense attorney standing up in the middle of a trial and saying, you know what, my client is probably guilty. Let's just plead out and get this over with.
That is a very apt analogy. And that is why the backlash from the legal community and foreign policy establishment was so fierce and so immediate. It wasn't just, I disagree with your policy opinion. It was, you are actively sabotaging our country's legal case.
And speaking of legal cases, this whole controversy didn't end with just a statement about islands. It spiraled into this personal feud that honestly sounds like a courtroom drama written for TV. I mean, we have a sitting senator threatening a retired Supreme Court justice.
And that's the next layer of this onion. What the editorial sees as the distraction tactic.
Okay, so Senator Marcoleta is feeling the heat. He is being roasted online and in the press for the give up Quieja comment. And his response involves Justice Antonio Carpio. Now, for our listeners who might not follow the legal scene in the Philippines that closely, who is Justice Carpio?
Justice Antonio Carpio is a legal heavyweight. He's a retired senior associate justice of the Supreme Court. But more than that, in this specific field, he is arguably the intellectual and legal architect of the Philippines' historic victory in the 2016 arbitral ruling against China.
So he's the guy.
He is the guy. He knows the law of the sea inside and out. He's written books on it. He has lectured on it all over the world. He is the expert's expert on this issue.
So Justice Carpio sees Marcoleta's comments about giving up the KG and basically says, this is legally wrong. Let's debate.
A standard intellectual challenge. Let's discuss the merits of your easy versus sovereignty argument. Let's do it in public so that people can hear both sides.
And Senator Marcoleta's response wasn't, okay, you name the time and place.
No. His response was, I'm going to sue you for treason.
Whoa. Okay, that is a massive escalation. We went from let's debate maritime geography to you are a traitor to your country.
It's the nuclear option in political discourse. He threatened to sue Carpio for treason regarding a judicial decision Carpio was part of, way back in 2011, in a case called Magalona versus Ermita.
Okay, we don't need to get into the legal weeds of the Magalona case, but we absolutely need to talk about the treason charge itself, because the editorial frames Justice Carpio's response as a schooling.
It was a legal clapback of the highest order. It was so elegant in its simplicity. Carpio didn't get angry. He didn't yell. He didn't countersue. He simply pointed out the legal definition of treason in the Philippine Revised Penal Code.
Which is?
Treason is a very specific crime. It is a crime against the state that has two core elements that must be present. And the second one is the key. It can only be committed during wartime.
Wait, Really? It is that specific. I always just thought treason meant, betraying your country in some general way.
In colloquial terms, yes, that's how we use the word. But in the actual law, no. Article 114 of the Revised Penal Code is crystal clear. The first element of treason is that the offender owes allegiance to the government of the Philippines. Okay, sure. The second element is that there is a war in which the Philippines is involved.
So if there is no declared war,
There can be no crime of treason. Legally, it is impossible. Since the Philippines is not currently at war with China, or anyone else for that matter, accusing someone of treason is legally nonsensical. It's a null set. The conditions for the crime don't exist.
that is, well, that's incredibly embarrassing for a lawmaker. You would think a senator, of all people, would know the basic elements of the very crimes he is accusing other people of.
It's a fundamental error. I mean, it's the legal equivalent of accusing someone of speeding when their car is parked in their own driveway. The basic condition for the crime just isn't there.
So why do it? Why make a legal threat that is so easily and so publicly debunked by, like, a first-year law student with a textbook?
The editorial interprets this as a communication blender, certainly, but also, and perhaps more importantly, as a classic distraction, a smokescreen.
The dead cat on the table strategy?
That's exactly it. The conversation about giving up the kirigi is going very badly for you. You're being called a tininator. You look
Right.
incompetent. So you throw a dead cat on the table. In this case, the dead cat is a shocking, headline-grabbing treason lawsuit against a respected jurist.
And suddenly, everyone stops talking about the kig?
Everyone stops talking about the gig and starts talking about the cat. Is Carpio a traitor? Can he actually be sued for a decade-old court decision? What is treason? It completely shifts the headline. It moves the spotlight off your original blunder.
It grabs the microphone. Even if the eventual answer is no, of course he can't be sued for treason, you have successfully muddied the waters for a few days. You've made the patriot look like a suspect just for a moment. You've created a both sides narrative where there really wasn't one before. But did it actually work in this case?
It seems to have backfired spectacularly. The source mentions that Marcoleta was roasted online. The Tagalog word they use is iginisa, which literally means to be sautéed.
Iginisa. I love that imagery. Just completely sautéed in his own oil.
The public, and especially the very vocal online community, saw right through the legal gymnastics. Instead of looking like a strong defender of the nation by accusing Carpio of treason, he ended up looking like someone who didn't know the law. It just reinforced the incompetence narrative from his original Kage statement.
It really highlights the desperation of the position. If you have to invent a war in order to charge your opponent with treason, you probably don't have a very strong argument for why we should give up an island with 400 people on it.
It all circles back to the danger of these tinnator accusations. When you're accused of siding with a foreign power, the natural, if panicked, defensive reaction is to accuse your accusers of being the real traitors. It becomes this mirror game. I'm not the puppet, you're the puppet.
And it just creates chaos and confusion.
Which, ironically, might be exactly what a foreign power wants. Confusion, division, a fractured political elite arguing amongst themselves about treason definitions instead of unifying on a coherent national strategy.
But the editorial argues that we need to cut through all of this noise, that the distraction shouldn't be allowed to work. We have to keep our eyes on the ball, the kie, the principle of sovereignty, and those 400 Filipinos living on Pagasa.
And that brings us to the emotional core of this deep dive. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about laws and treaties. It's not just about the technical text of UNCLS. It is about how Filipinos feel about their country, their land.
The editorial ends on a very, very poignant note. It doesn't end with a legal argument. It invokes the Philippine national anthem.
Lupang Hinirang, the chosen land.
Specifically, it quotes the very last lines.
Aminigayan e pag may mga api ang mamatay ng dahil siyo.
Can you translate that for our international listeners?
It translates to, it is our joy when there's an oppressor to die because of you or to die for you.
Those are incredibly heavy lyrics. It is our joy to die for you. That is not just, I love my country. That is a statement of ultimate sacrifice. I will die for it.
They are. They were written during a time of revolution, of fighting for independence against colonial powers. They're soaked in the history of struggle. And in the context of this modern debate, the editorial uses them as a direct warning.
A warning to whom?
A warning to the politicians, to the so-called senators. It is effectively saying, Do not underestimate this feeling.
You can't just calculate your way out of patriotism. You can't put it on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. You can look at polling data, you can place your bets on the next election, you can take the soft diplomacy funding for your provincial bridges, but there is a bedrock of national sentiment, this deep-seated willingness to sacrifice for the nation. That is the third rail of Philippine politics. If you touch it, if you disrespect it by saying, just give it up to make it easy, you will get burned.
It frames the senator stance not just as being politically risky, but as being morally offensive to that core national creed.
Precisely. It paints them as being completely out of touch with the soul of the nation. It suggests they are operating on a purely transactional level while the people are operating on an identity level. And that's a dangerous gap.
However, and this is a really important point of nuance, the editorial isn't actually calling for war. It isn't asking people to literally go out and die right now.
No, absolutely not. That would be reckless and irresponsible. The goal isn't to romanticize conflict. The goal, as the source puts it, is to find the path that brings the best gain. The phrase used is pinakaminam na ganancia for the Philippines.
Pinakaminam na ganancia. The optimal result. The smartest win. Not necessarily the loudest or most aggressive one.
And that requires a very difficult balancing act. It requires a dual focus. On one hand, you have sovereignty, protecting territorial integrity at all costs, keeping the Kieg, supporting those 400 people on Pag-asa, not giving up a single inch of soil.
And on the other hand,
you have the economy, ensuring national prosperity. We can't just ignore the fact that China is a huge economic partner, a massive neighbor. We can't ignore the realities of global trade. We can't just shut the door and isolate ourselves. That would hurt the Filipino people too.
So the ideal stance isn't war with China, and it certainly isn't surrender to China.
It is a third way, a middle path, a path that does not bow down. The Tagalog word is hindin and gangayupapa, but is also smart and strategic, something Filipinos can be proud of. It is about asserting your rights without being reckless and seeking prosperity without selling the farm.
That is such a tough needle to thread. I mean, it sounds great on paper, but actually executing that policy day in and day out.
It is the hardest job in foreign policy, but it is what the public expects.
Yeah.
They want a government that stands up for them, not one that gives up islands because of a fundamental misunderstanding of the EEZ. They want both dignity and development.
So to recap where we have been today, this has been a real journey.
A long one, yeah. We have covered a lot of ground.
We started with a new word. Senators, this powerful, biting label for politicians who are accused of prioritizing China's interests.
We then debunk the legal myth at the center of it all. Just remember the Hawaii analogy. Sovereignty is about owning the land. The EEZ is about rights to the water's resources. Distance doesn't kill ownership.
And we looked at the reality on the ground on Pag-asa Island. It is a town, not just a rock. It has a school, it has voters, it has a community, it is a home.
We explored the why, the fascinating and cynical theory of political opportunism, this idea of betting on a future Sara Duterte presidency, and the powerful, quiet influence of Chinese soft power on local officials.
And finally, we saw how the distraction tactics, like these baseless treason lawsuits, often collapse under basic scrutiny because they simply lack a foundation in law.
It's such a complex web. It's not just one thing. It's law, it's politics, it's psychology, and it is absolutely about money.
But I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought. The editorial mentioned something that really stuck with me throughout our whole discussion, this idea of China pouring money into select provinces as a form of soft diplomacy.
The ground game. The infrastructure diplomacy we talked about.
Right. And as we watch these senators debate on TV, and we see the headlines about legal definitions and accusations of treason, I just wonder, how much of the country's foreign policy is actually being shaped quietly, far away from the cameras in Manila?
That is the provocative question, isn't it?
Is the real battle for territory and influence happening in the Senate halls during these heated debates? Or is it actually happening in a small provincial governor's office, where the funding for a desperately needed bridge or a new market creates a quiet loyalty that no international treaty can ever break?
Economic dependency is a form of gravity. It pulls slowly, but it pulls relentlessly hard. If the tangible local reality for people is, China built this road that gets my crops to market, that shapes the political map just as much as an arbitrary line drawn in the ocean.
It makes you wonder if we're all watching the puppet show up on stage while the entire stage is being quietly rebuilt underneath us.
You always have to look at the foundations, follow the money, not just the rhetoric.
Thank you for listening to this deep dive. It is a very active, developing story, and that Seedinator label probably isn't going away anytime soon.
I suspect we will be hearing it a lot more as the next election cycle begins to heat up.
Absolutely. Stay curious, stay critical, and we will see you in the next deep dive.